This is not your average bone broth. I guarantee you will not find a bone broth recipe like this anywhere else on YouTube. And you won't find a more healing or a more affordable way to make this deeply restorative ancient remedy. This is the old school way, a forgotten way. I call it my compost bone broth, and it is great medicine. If you're not a big cook, no worries. This is almost impossible to mess up. Bone broth has nourished human beings for thousands of years, long before supplements and wellness trends. Cultures everywhere simmered bones, herbs, and vegetables because the collagen, the minerals, and the amino acids in this are deeply restorative for the skin, joints, digestion, immunity, all of it. So today I'm going to show you exactly how I make my medicinal bone broth. Let's get into it.
Okay, so this is my medicinal herbal bone broth, and this is one of the easiest, most nourishing things I make in my kitchen, and it's really hard to mess up. I call it my compost bone broth because almost everything that goes into it is something one would normally throw away, and it turns these scraps into one of the most healing foods you can have in your home. So I cook a lot, and over time I started noticing how many incredible ingredients were ending up in the trash. So now I just save them. So things like bones from the meals I make, like chicken bones, short rib bones, basically anything with marrow and connective tissue. I buy my meat from our local farmers market, so I know these bones are really nutrient dense and I don't want to waste them. I also save my vegetable scraps, so things like carrot peels, onion ends, garlic skins, ginger peels, turmeric peels, mushrooms, celery ends. I mean, all of it. And I cook with a lot of herbs. So I save the herbal stalks like parsley, rosemary, thyme, dill. All of this goes into these silicone bags I have in my freezer. And these bags fill up, I mean, surprisingly fast, even for a household of just two people. One small tip, avoid vegetables in the brassica family. So things like broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, they will make your bone broth taste and smell like farts. And nobody wants that. So adding brassicas is really the only way you can mess up this bone broth recipe. Now, if using scraps feels weird to you, that's totally okay. You can do this instead. Buy a rotisserie chicken from the grocery store and just eat the meat. Save the carcass. Add some chopped carrots, onions, garlic, some herbs. Again, bone broth is actually very hard to mess up. It's one of the most forgiving things you can cook. So when I know I'm about to make bone broth, I grab mushrooms from the farmer's market. I live in the Appalachian Mountains of Western North Carolina where mushrooms grow abundantly. My personal favorites to use are shiitake and lion's mane. I mean, look at these. They're gorgeous. They add this beautiful flavor and they have incredible medicinal properties. Because I'm an herbalist, I also add in medicinal herbs. So things like nettle leaf, which is basically nature's multivitamin. Things like mimosa bark, which is a beautiful, uplifting herb. Red ginseng. I mean, there's so many herbs you can throw in there, and you can add in flowers too. I actually grow calendula flowers on my property, which I harvest and dry. Now, I don't have any of those today since we're kind of coming to the end of winter, but those are often in my bone broth. Calendula is wonderful for skin health. I mean, these herbs add a whole other layer of nourishment to the broth. Even just adding in a little nettle leaf is a wonderful place to start, but they're totally optional. If this feels overwhelming to you, then don't worry about it. Just skip it. I always add a good mineral-rich salt like this Icelandic sea salt I have, and I always add a splash or two of apple cider vinegar. The vinegar helps pull minerals and nutrients out of the bones as the broth cooks. So actually making it is incredibly simple. So everything goes into a large crock pot. Now you can definitely do this on the stove, but it is going to cook for a very long time. I'm not personally comfortable leaving the house with something on the stove, but I'm completely comfortable leaving the house with something in a crock pot. So I use a large crock pot. I cover it with water because most of my ingredients are frozen. I like to pour in hot water over it so the temperature comes up faster. Then I just cook it on low, usually somewhere between 32 and 42-ish hours. You just don't want to go over 48 hours because it can make the bone broth bitter. So somewhere up to 32, up to I don't know, I'd say 45 hours. That long cooking time gives the broth a time to pull out, collagen, minerals, and all this flavor out of the bones, herbs, and veggies. As it cooks, the water level will drop a bit. So sometimes halfway through it, I'll add a little more water. But otherwise, you really just leave it alone and let time kind of do the work. When it's done, I turn the crock pot off and let everything cool. Then I strain the broth. I usually pull out the big pieces first, and then I strain the rest into mason jars. This is how I like to store the broth. I store it in mason jars and I keep it in the freezer. Do not fill the mason jars all the way to the top. It's a word to the wise. If you do this, the liquid will expand in the freezer and you will have frozen bone broth in cracked mason jars. I know this from personal experience. Another tip, make sure you allow these mason jars to cool completely before they go in the freezer. This bone broth will last a very long time in the freezer. You can sip this broth on its own. I mean, this is wonderful for skin, hair, joints, digestion, immune support. So it's wonderful on its own, especially if you or someone in your house gets sick. It's a great thing to just pull out of the freezer and use. But I also use it as a base for almost everything I cook. So things like soups, stews, cooking rice. I make a very nutritious rice with this bone broth, sauces, all of that stuff. And because the bone broth already has so much flavor, you don't need to add any extra seasoning or herbs when you make these things. It's just ready to go. So to me, this is one of the most beautiful ways to cook. It turns scraps into nourishment. It wastes almost nothing, and it fills your kitchen and your body with something very deeply restorative. So let me know if you try this ancient earth school remedy, and as always, have a good week.